I'm Piers from Queensland Kettlebells. Coming up, we have a video with Master Original Strength Instructor Mark Shropshire. Mark's going to be talking about what he does and why he does it, and it's about a 45-minute interview. You're going to hear about different techniques that he uses, different people that he works with, but it's worth the time. So buckle up and let's go. G'day, Mark. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do during the week.
Good day, sir. Well, a little bit about me. I've been in the strength and conditioning field primarily. Close to 25 or 30 years now. After about like 10 or 15, I just stopped counting. I've just been doing it for a while.
Sure.
Nobody cares at that point, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I kind of cut my teeth in strength and conditioning, and specifically working with athletes, training them to get faster through a system called the Piers acceleration system, which I think now is called Athletic Republic, which is a speed plyometric type training program.
Okay.
That's where I kind of got my start professionally. Educationally, I've got a background in exercise physiology, a master's degree in exercise phys. And I've been primarily working in that space since about 1995 or so.
Yeah.
So quite a while.
Yeah.
And it's a labor of love. This is my sole job. This is what I do. I've never done a side hustle. This isn't a side. This is it, man. I'm all in.
Yeah, awesome. And what does a normal day look like for you, Mark?
A normal day for me, typically I'm usually up around 6 a.m. or so, 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I have some teams that I train in the morning, some high school teams that I work with. And then I typically go to one of the local gymnasiums here in Boulder. We're talking from Boulder, Colorado right now at the moment.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'll go there. I'll do a little bit of personal training.
Yeah.
And then typically after that, I'll get my own workout in, do a little training that point.
Yeah.
And then I'll do a little bit of some recovery stuff. I like to do some sauna work, or just I'll sit out in the sun for a bit.
Yeah.
And then I'll have a little bit of a break, and then I go to another facility in Denver where I train club volleyball athletes, and do a little bit of personal training at that facility as well. So that's pretty much my gig right now.
Yeah. And so what sports are you working with right now?
Right now, primarily baseball and volleyball. Yeah.
So big rotational athletes.
Pretty much, yeah. That's if I had a sweet spot, it's a lot of that. When I lived in Maryland, recently relocated out here to Colorado this past summer. I worked with a lot of lacrosse players. Lacrosse is a big sport in Maryland, and so which was new to me, because I came from the Midwest, of the middle of the country. There is no lacrosse in the state that I'm from, Dakota. So that was new, but so I worked with a lot of lacrosse guys. But I was also fortunate enough to make some neat acquaintances with some individuals out there, notably like the strength and conditioning coaches for the Baltimore Orioles. And as a result of that, was able to work with him and some of his athletes in the off season. So I got a taste of working with some professional athletes. And what brought me out there was working for a guy named Cal Ripken, who was a fairly well-known baseball player in the United States, especially around Baltimore. So with that name behind me, I also had the opportunity to work with a lot of potential draft picks, first-round draft picks that were going into Major League Baseball. So I had a little bit of cred with Cal's name behind me.
Sure, of course.
So that was pretty cool. I worked with a lot of baseball guys, a lot of lacrosse guys, but also along the way worked with, probably just because of the area that I was in, a lot of military guys, guys that were working with FBI, the United States Marshals, some of the Tier 1 special operations guys here and there too. So that was kind of interesting. Just they're a different type of athlete, different needs, but very interesting work nonetheless.
Yeah. And your average PT client, does it look the same as those guys, or is it
No. So like those, my average PT client's probably just a normal person. They want to stay generally fit. They want to move well. They want to avoid aches and pains. They don't want to get hurt when they train.
Sure.
They like a little bit of variety to their training. And my typical one probably doesn't fit the normal mode of like a normal gym. Like, we're going to go sit in a chest press machine, a lat pull down machine. Which I don't program that kind of stuff. That's not my style. So they tend to like kind of like training through the original strength lens. Be it like more movement restoration, which I've done a lot of that. Or more through the I guess we call it the original strength performance model. Training that way. So that's
and do they span all age groups, or
I've worked with preteen people all the way up to I guess my mom counts.
She's post-teen.
She is very post-teen. I'm 54. I'm not going to give it away and tell you what my mom's age is, but and she was a retired music teacher, and she was very active. She taught elementary music, and she would dance with her kids and stuff like that. And after she retired, she noticed a definite loss in her mobility, and that's where we started using a lot of the principles of original strength to help her. And she basically wanted to be able to get up off of the floor without using her hands. And lo and behold, she did it. She still does her resets to this day. It's just a part of her process and keeping herself mobile and healthy and strong. So so it goes from that all the way down to preteen kids. Everybody in between.
And so you said you started this in 95. What inspired you to go down this path?
That's a really good question. I'm going to try to kind of organize it in my head a little bit. My first job, the training was fairly protocol. I said it was for Peer Acceleration, which is now Athletic Republic. And you get a big manual, you go through training, and the workouts are fairly scripted. And as a new guy into the business, I've kind of followed along and did what I was taught, did what the book said. The evaluations were the same. And the training programs were relatively the same.
Which is a good start, right?
Well, you got to start somewhere. And so when I say this, I'm not trying to disparage them at all.
Absolutely.
But I was a new guy, and I was figuring this stuff out by myself. And what I started to notice was that we would do the same evaluations, run the same training program, but we'd have wildly different results. Some people would really take to the training, and their numbers would really improve. They get a lot faster, jump higher, whatnot. Others would get worse. Some would have no change. And I was perplexed by that. And, at that point, I was consuming a lot of books. I was reading as much as I could. And I came across some people that started to kind of change how I looked at movement. Because I did, in exercise phys, it was clinical, kind of a clinical exercise phys. We didn't study human movement that much. And our evaluations in this program were all metric based. Like, we do a pre-test. What's your 5-10-5 agility? What's your vertical jump? What's your 10-yard, your 20, your 40-yard dash, right? But it didn't really. So basically, it just told me you're fast, you're slow, you jump higher, you don't. But it didn't tell me why. We'd also do some strength testing too, so you could say, well, you need to lift more weights. But that was kind of protocoled as well. And again, as a new guy, I didn't really have much training experience, so I kind of followed along. So I started looking at some different ways of kind of trying to figure this problem out, because I felt obligated. People were paying me money to get them better. And they weren't, and I felt terrible about that. So I first started looking at answers for that. I started looking at a lot of Vern Gambetta's stuff. He's a guy that's been there, done that for a long time. And he talked about functional training and how the body moved in units, or I guess now we call them like anatomy trains. And he talked about the Serape effect, which is all new and novel information for me at the time. And then I started looking at work that Gray Cook and Functional Movement Screen had done.
Yeah.
And that was the first guy that I came across that was able to kind of quantify movement in a way that you could grade it out.
Yeah.
And then that kind of led me into original strength.
Yeah.
And that would have been 2011, 2012. I started hearing about that and attended my first workshop. Yeah, the old days. And on when I took a look at what Tim and at that point Jeff Newport was a part of the program, what they had created, within about an hour of sitting in that workshop, I could see how I could apply these principles to every single person I worked with.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if you're a professional athlete, if you're a professional soldier, if you're a retired music teacher, if you're a high school athlete that wanted, it didn't matter because movement was movement.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it was so simple. I kind of walked out of that first day. It was a 2-day workshop at that time.
Yeah.
Kicking myself like, why didn't you come up with this? This is so easy. How could you miss this? And I made it a point at that point in time is that I gotta know more about this. I gotta get in with these guys. I gotta pick their brains. It was so simple.
Yeah.
I was like, I needed to know more. And so I made it a point to sit down with Jeff and with Tim, and I kept on, sending them text messages and emails and showing success stories and telling everybody I could about it. And I think I was such a squeaky wheel. The only way they could get me to shut up was to bring me on as an instructor and let me teach, co-teach some workshops and then eventually teach my own. And, here we are now, now I'm a master instructor for them. So that's maybe not the shortest answer to your question, but that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, no, look, and there's a lot of parallels in my story as well. So I came through via sort of RKC Strong First kind of route, and then FMS with Gray Cook, and then Tim and Jeff again with the conduit for me into that sort of thing. And it took me a little longer. I think I was about 6 hours into the first day of the 2-day workshop before I went, I'd spent about 20 grand at that point, just trying to figure out how I could get these people to the point where some of the other stuff that I really wanted to do started to make sense for them. And the OS just provided that foundation that allowed someone to go from whatever starting point to a performance mindset or to the capability to do whatever they wanted to do, whatever that happened to be. And so I also started to annoy them, but I started to annoy them from the other side of the world. And so I think they got me to do the instructing just so that they've stopped having to hop on planes.
Yeah, it's like, you do this. This is a long drive.
That's right. Yeah. So what's the number one thing each day that you do regularly that helps you to make a life that feels great?
The one thing I probably do on the ring is I probably do, I have to drive a little bit from place to place.
Sure.
So I'm seated a little bit more now than I was before.
Sure.
And initially that really put the brakes in my movement. I could feel myself not moving as well, to be honest. So what I started doing, I just started doing a lot of diaphragmatic breathing all the time.
Yeah, awesome.
And then I hit a stoplight or traffic, and I'd move my head around as much as I could. At the gym that I go to, after my workouts, they have a nice a sauna and a wet and a dry sauna. And so I sit in the sauna and do diaphragmatic breathing and move my head around and do seated resets.
Yeah, awesome.
I do that every day.
Yeah.
It's kind of a non-negotiable part of my day.
So it's just the incidental bits where you're adding resets into stuff you're doing already to a certain extent. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. And if it's not done there, I'm the weird guy doing marching cross crawls in between my sets of deadlifts, or I'll get down on all fours and I'll do some rocking whilst I'm resting. It's like you said, it's little sprinkles of salt and pepper original strength throughout my day. when I get done at here, I'm going to go out on the gym floor and I got to roll around a little bit because I've been sitting in front of a computer for 3 hours.
Yep. Yeah.
And I realize I'm, it's a gift and it's a privilege to be able to have access to that all the time.
Sure.
But it's one that I'm going to take full advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's yeah. So it's a privilege that you're able to head out onto the gym floor and do. That's what you're. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I realize that not everybody has that, but most everybody has a living room.
Yeah.
Most everybody has a bedroom floor.
Yeah.
And episodically, if it's been kind of a hard day of training, it's been a stressful day, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll lay in bed or I'll lay on the floor and I'll do some belly breathing and just the simplest of simple resets. And some head nods and maybe some rocking, maybe not.
Yeah.
Just those two fundamental resets, the breathing and the head nods keep me mobile. They allow me to do what I like to do. I love training.
Yeah.
I like pushing stuff over my head. And that stuff, those simple little things allow me to do the big, cool, fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one thing that I've noticed running the seminars, running the OS courses or certifications, is so often it's those really early resets that have the big payoff for people, regardless of their quality of movement to start off with.
Yep. Yeah, that's I couldn't agree more. That's like the big eye openers. When you pick a movement, right?
Yeah.
You try to touch your toes, you squat, or you bring your arm over your head or something like that. And we'll go, all right, so let me talk a little bit about belly breathing and the diaphragm and the yada yada yada.
Yeah. And
then we try it and they lay there for 2 minutes and all of a sudden their fingers have met their toes for the first time in like years, right?
Yeah.
It's a reunion.
Yeah.
It's like lost cousins. And like they're looking around and they, oh my God.
Yeah.
This feels great. And I didn't think I could do this, or the ease of which they get down there, you know? And then sometimes for some people, as the resets become more complex, their nervous system isn't ready for that. And they, they may plateau a little bit, which, then we can kind of steer them down, simplifying the resets, which I kind of tend to like to do. All my own personal reset practice is simple and gentle.
Yeah.
I don't church it up too much.
Yeah. It's Ryan Hurst from GMB often will tell people if they can't smile while they're doing something, it's probably too demanding.
It's not wrong.
Yeah. And when we smile, we tend to diaphragmatically breathe.
We do.
It's it's a nice feedback loop.
It is. Yeah. It's hard to mouth breathe when you're it looks stupid, so whatever.
Yeah. So what's your athletic background, Mark?
Athletically, okay, so in I guess it would probably start like just like my physical education as a young kid back in the 70s.
Sure.
70s, early 80s. Our physical education was a little bit different than it is now.
Sure.
I was exposed to a lot of different things. We had a dancing unit, we had gymnastics, we had wrestling, awesome. All that kind of stuff. And then once you got into middle school and high school, you kind of picked your sports. And I played 3 sports in high school. I wrestled, which is, you could argue wrestling is a combative form of resets. I played football, American football.
Yep.
And was a pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, right.
And those are my 3 sports that I did in high school. I was lightly recruited to play college football. Didn't want to do that. And ended up playing college baseball. And had a fine time with that. And played a summer of semi-professional baseball.
Nice.
And then kind of played in what they call like Ponce de Leon leagues. It's like old guys that still want to play baseball.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Until I was probably about 30, 35 or so.
Yeah.
And then after that, started training for a black belt in Taekwondo and got that somewhere in my early to mid 40s.
Sure. Do you still practice?
No, I don't. It was I kind of miss it.
Yeah.
It was a time of my life where um my youngest son had got his black belt, my wife had got her black belt, and I just was like, I've always had a fascination with martial arts.
Yeah.
And I knew the master of the
Yeah.
school, and it helped him with some movement and training stuff, and
Yeah.
decided to give it a go. And so I really just dedicated like a good got 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
of where that was a focus for me.
Yeah.
And strength and conditioning kind of took a little bit of a back step. What?
You're a pretty long human, so I'd imagine that that your kicks are gonna cover some ground.
That was my one thing, is I was just because of what I did, I could usually just wait and wait and wait until everybody else got tired, and then I'd have a shot if we sparred.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the keeping people away from me with long legs kept me from getting my bell rung quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to wear a lot to get inside your guard, I think. So.
Yeah, I have space issues, Piers, and I don't like people close to me, so it worked to my advantage.
Yeah. And right now, are you working on a specific goal?
Not maybe yes, I am, and I just don't know it.
Sure.
I'm a little bit like Tim Anderson,
yeah,
with OS. And I might be speaking for him, or maybe I just to misinterpret what Tim is working on.
Sure.
But I want to move well and be strong and be able, pretty much until my tissues have just had enough.
Yeah.
And then there's something in me that just gives out.
Yeah.
So I'm working on, I'm 54 right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm in better shape than I was in my early 20s.
Awesome.
I feel like I move better. I feel better. I definitely eat better. And I want to kind of continue that into my 60s, my 70s, my 80s, my 90s, and whatever lies beyond. We talk a lot about original strength, how basically having a healthy vestibular system is kind of like your fountain of youth.
Yeah.
And if you don't move your head and you don't move your body, there's that basically atrophies your vestibular system, and which atrophies your muscles, and the less you move, the sooner the end's going to come. And I don't want to be that guy. So I guess maybe my long-term goal is I want to be that old guy that people look up and go, how's he do that?
Yeah.
Just for selfish reasons. And I want to have that experience, and then be able to share that kind of stuff with other people along the way.
Yeah, awesome. And people can obviously see a little bit about where your movement and where your physique is at on your Instagram.
Yep.
Do you know what your handle is? What you're at? Is it at Mark Shropshire?
It's at Shropshire ST.
Okay.
So it'll look like Shropshire Est.
Yeah.
But back before I was kind of an Instagram newbie. I had no idea what Instagram was. I didn't know how to make it work. So some of the high school kids that I was training at the time helped me set up my Instagram page, and that's the name they came up with. So at the time, my business called Shropshire Sports Training.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Hence the ST. Yeah. But now it looks like I'm the Shropshirest of Shropshires, I guess. Which is ridiculous.
So I had an Instagram for my business, and one day I tried to sign into it, and I accidentally created a personal Instagram. So the Instagram that I use day to day is one that I clicked some button somewhere, and now I've got 2 Instagrams.
I think I did something very similar along the way, and it's like I had to have somebody like another high school kid that got it, showing how to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a process getting that, understanding all that. But episodically I'll put some stuff out there on Instagram, things I'd like to do for training, occasionally what I eat, how I make it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So at Shropshire ST.
Yeah.
All right. And so what was the last book you read, Mark? And what was the best thing about it?
The last book I read, gosh, what was the name of that book? it's a good book too. Is my friend Chip Morton sent it to me. Gosh, what was the name of the book? It was a great book. Basically, the name the book was about a guy who kind of wanted to go back to more of a simplistic way of doing life.
Sure.
And he wrote about his experience and kind of tied it into like a lot of life lessons and people that he had interviewed. And he ended up spending about a month up in Alaska with these two guys that basically they would go up there and they were hunting not elk. What the heck do they have up there? That's just herds of those things.
Like moose or
not moose.
Wouldn't be caribou. That's still Canada.
Yeah, it was caribou actually. Yeah, I believe it was caribou. They have these huge herds of caribou that migrate, and apparently they're very sketchy. They're very aware. They got a great, good sense of hearing and smell and whatnot. They're hard to hunt. But these guys would hunt them the way the old timers did. That you would go out for weeks at a time. And you would follow the herds. And what they do is that they basically they called the herd by not shooting the first animal they saw.
Yeah, right.
But they would look for the older, more mature caribou and harvest them.
Yeah.
And then they would have to go and they would, field strip this thing and then carry the meat out of the backcountry back to where this airplane was going to come and land.
Wow.
Gosh, I wish I could remember the name of the book. It was a great book. I really loved it. But they drew parallels back into how kind of getting back to kind of that simplistic way of life was something that we've really lost. We've kind of lost that sense of ourselves because life is so easy and everything is just kind of there at our footsteps, and a lot of the negative consequences that come along with that. So fascinating book. If Chip watches this, Chip, I'm sorry, I did love the book. I'm just bad with remembering things like that.
Do you know the name of the guy that was the story was about?
I don't. No. I could maybe go get on my phone here real quick and look it up before we're done. But
yeah, well, look, I reckon it's probably worth doing, just because otherwise my brain won't settle on it. While you figure this out, I met a German girl recently who had actually spent some time in Alaska, and she talked about this house that she stayed at on a lake, and the herd of caribou would come through, and it must have been caribou, but she said there was hundreds in the herd, like massive amounts. That would cross.
That's what this guy said, is just like these herds are just overwhelming and it's huge.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm scrolling through a chat with that I have with Chip on here, hoping that I can find this thing.
And they're massive creatures. They're not. You imagine like Bambi, but like when you think of deer and when you think of those sorts of things, but moose and caribou are giant creatures.
Yeah, apparently so. I've never seen one myself in person. I feel like this is a fool's errand. I'm looking and I can't find it. If I can find the book, and I know I've got it at home.
Yeah.
I'll text it to you, and you can maybe write it in the title here or something like that.
Yeah, awesome. I'll figure that out. Yeah.
No, it was a good book. It was a really good book. But I've read that book, a lot of John Krakauer books. I like those kind of like outdoory, adventure-y type of books. I read all of Tim's stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. He's out. Even though we're instructors in this. Anytime Tim writes something, he just phrases it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
That gives me just a deeper sense of what it is we're teaching and what it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
I always enjoy those things.
He's often got weird little things that summarize things well. One of the terms he likes to use is that your diaphragm is the captain of your spinal stabilizers.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing that and going, oh, that just if you've played any sports, having that sort of idea of someone who's just leading the team in the direction that they need to go, and setting the tone for everything really works.
Well, what I think what Tim is really good at is he takes fairly complex subject matter, and he's able to distill it, so that a person that has no knowledge of really what we're, or maybe just has they can name it, or they've heard of it, but they don't know what it does. Tim can just explain it in just the simplest of ways so everybody can understand. It makes it very accessible, which I love about him.
Yeah. What's your favorite food, Mark?
My favorite food, I guess, based on quantity that I eat, would probably be eggs.
Yeah, right. Do you have a favorite way of preparing eggs?
Not particularly. It's more born out of convenience and time.
Sure.
So, today I had 6 scrambled eggs, and I mixed it up with a little bit of cheese. And put a little bit of hot sauce on it.
Perfect.
And threw it inside a couple little burrito wraps. Why? Because we've had these burrito wraps sitting in the fridge for a long time, and I don't like them going. I didn't want them going south, so I had egg burritos this morning for breakfast. Had 3 of those, and but I do tend to eat a lot of protein. Tends to be like leaner sources of protein if I can.
Sure.
Not necessarily, I'm not like going into keto or any of that kind of stuff, but I just tend to find my body responds best to that. And
it's often more satisfying, right?
It is. Yeah, I'm satiated. I typically will eat once, maybe twice a day. Some of that depends on the training that I've done. Others, it's like, if I'm not hungry, there's no sense in eating just because it's there.
Of course.
Just don't do it.
So aside from driving between Denver and Boulder, what are your hobbies?
My hobbies, I love being in the outdoors. So anything kind of outdoorsy, I enjoy that. Now we're the home that I'm living in faces the Front Range of the Colorado Rockies.
Awesome.
So, every morning I get to get up, and I get a sunrise behind me, and I get to watch kind of that orangish glow kind of reflecting off the snowy capped mountains. And every day the sun and clouds will just kind of interact in a way where it kind of hits the mountains differently. So even though I'm looking at the same mountains all the time, they look different. And then the sun will set behind them. And so, if it's a nice sunset, I'll get a nice orange glow behind them for a little bit, and then it gets dark fast with the mountains. But I really enjoy hiking. I enjoy camping, where I'll just put my stuff on my back and just kind of go disappear into the woods for a day or 2 or a week. And I find that when I spend more time in nature, I come back just a better person. I'm more calm. I feel more centered, just more at peace and at ease.
And I mean, there's plenty of research to suggest that the sounds we hear when we're outside in the bush or in the forest actually do have a measurable impact on the activity in our brain.
I could believe that. I mean, if we kind of if we're looking at the evolutionary yardstick of human beings being around, being indoors with lights like this and the sounds that we're making in cars is a relatively new phenomena.
Pretty novel.
That being outside, interacting more with nature versus protecting ourselves from it, was kind of what we have done for most of the time that we've been around. So maybe there is something to that. I don't know.
Now, I feel we probably covered this already to a certain extent. But the next question I've got here is, why do you choose to train the way you train? And I think beforehand you talked about how you wanted to still be great when you're older, and to have people look at you as the old guy that doing cool things. So when I look at the way,
because why do I do it?
or yeah, what is it that makes you choose? And let's shift away from the global why
Yeah.
and talk a little bit about the way you use tools in order to hit that why.
I think the switch kind of hit for me at some point when I started doing what I was doing on one of my hikes. I would go out into the woods with my buddies, two friends. One is a nationally ranked for his age group cross-country skier.
Mhm.
You know, just had this huge,
Hardcore sport.
huge cardiovascular, big motor.
Mm.
And the other guy was a Navy SEAL.
Mhm.
And then there's me.
Impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and so I'm hanging with these two guys, right?
Yeah.
And it had been I've been training this way for maybe a year or two.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, I can hang with these guys.
Mm.
And I'm not slowing down. And when we were out of the woods, I didn't feel beat up.
Yeah.
It felt great.
Awesome.
And it was, I had trained a little bit, maybe unwittingly through the OS lens.
Yeah.
And what I was really trying to do is develop a lot of work capacity.
Mhm.
But the way I started doing it was through a lot of, opposite arm and leg type of movements,
Yeah.
moving with loads, pulling loads, pushing loads,
Mhm.
shoving a load this way, shoving a load that way, and then
Yeah.
going down and just, working that, something for the front of Mark and something for the back of Mark in just different ways.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I would just put that together. And so what I started realizing was the type of training that I'd sort of stumbled onto, and that then Tim had kind of refined and put out there in front of me to look at, was very usable strength and very usable conditioning. It just it went across all different aspects of my life.
Sure.
I was able to function and train and do things, I guess better than I thought I could. And then when I was with other people, I'd be like, why am I still able to go? And these guys are quitting. Why are they stopping? And I kind of drop back into, I train in a lot of contralateral patterns, a lot of midline crossing stuff, a lot of rotational type of patterns. Even though you're going to take a look at my Instagram and you're going to see me taking a barbell and shoving it up over my head, I like doing that too.
Yep.
But what I would sometimes you won't see is after I'm done with that, I may go and I'll intermittently crawl.
Yep.
Or I'll go and I'll lay on the floor and I'll do rolling resets. And I'll just put a timer for 5 minutes and I'll just roll for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So sort of stitching that hip shoulder connection again and offloading my spine from the heavy, overhead loads or the heavy deadlifts and things like that.
Yeah.
So I've been able to kind of amalgamate a little bit more of the traditional with maybe a little bit more of the avant-garde of original strength.
Sure.
And make it work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I found because I'm similar in how I like to train, but I found once I added in more of the OS style movements, more of the carries, more of the contralateral patterning.
Yeah.
I found that my transmission, so it's sort of from hips to shoulders, was able to both be really stiff when I needed to be, but also the ability to be really fluid and create the whip or the connection to do things quickly as well, or to drag or all those sorts of things. Having this amazing system that can do both functions well was the big jump I think that original strength offered.
You said something that I either say it to myself or I've said it a lot is, when I need to be rigid, I can be rigid. Meaning, you need a certain amount of rigidity to do heavy deadlifts. You need a certain amount of rigidity to do, heavy back squats or front squats or overhead presses. It's a requirement of that movement to make the movement safe.
Yeah.
But when you're, taking a sled and you put, 2 times your body weight on it and you're attach a rope to it and you're doing hand over hand pulls like that, and then pushing it and then crawling back, you don't want that rigidity.
Yeah.
You need that spine to, it's got a coil. It's got a coil and uncoil. So you should be able to do both.
Yeah.
And you need to do both.
Yeah. It's a game changer once you figure out which gap you need to to be able to access.
100% it is. Yeah, it's having that flexibility, no pun intended.
Yeah.
To do what you want when you want and how you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that gift that OS and that OS performance lens has really lent itself to me.
Yeah, awesome. And so the last real question I've got for you, Mark, is if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Control animals.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's only when they become a ninja, right? You can become invisible and control animals with your mind.
Yeah, that would still be pretty cool.
It would be. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, or even just talk to animals.
I know, just communicate with them.
Yeah.
That would be kind of a cool superpower. Maybe I'll choose that one because I've always wondered what goes on in people in animals' minds. To be honest with you,
Oh man,
it's kind of a curiosity.
Yeah, I think that'd be super awesome.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I don't think about that stuff that often, to be honest with you. You know, whenever I've been around Tim and we go around the room, Tim asks that question and I know it's coming and I hate that question. And I usually just make something up just to go along with it, you know?
Yeah. I think super healing's normally the one that I go for. But that's just because
that's a good one, actually.
Yeah. I just read too much when I was a
kid. I think I've in some way, in some respect, I've kind of experienced that. About 4 or 5 years ago, I would say. It's probably probably a little bit more than that by now. I'd had really bad hip pain, and I got it doing some deadlifts, and I was training with some professional baseball players. These are young guys, you know, they're in their early 20s, and they're throwing out some good loads, and I was hanging with them, and I kind of felt a tweak one day, kind of in my right hip.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's the cost of doing business, right? Every once in a while, you're going to hit these things, and it'll go away. And you know, most of the time I was right, except for this time I wasn't.
Sure.
And it was hanging on, and it got worse, and hanging on, and you know, I'd foam roll it, I'd stretch, tried cupping, you know, all that stuff. Because I worked inside a PT clinic where I had access to stuff.
Sure.
And none of it took, Piers. And it got to the point where I couldn't move anymore. It affected my sleep. I couldn't basically fall asleep for more than about 20 or 30 minutes without waking up in abject pain.
Yeah, right.
The pain started radiating from my hip into my lower back, down my quad, into my shin.
Wow.
And I'm the movement guy, right?
Yeah,
I'm the guy that people come to, and I felt like a fraud. I couldn't train anymore. And so I kind of reached out to Tim. I was like, hey man, I'm in really bad straits. I'd gone to see an orthopedist. I'd had an MRI on it. And I said, look, I've got bone on bone right now, full thickness cartilage loss, and a torn labrum in my right hip. What can I do? And he referred me to Jeff Newport, who incidentally apparently had the same thing.
Yeah.
And I called up Jeff, and he spent about a good 3 or 4 hours on the phone with me that day on a Friday afternoon.
Yep.
Talking to me and taking me through it. And this is, you know, basically explain to me how we're going to approach this thing. And he asked me, before you hurt your hip, could you do a pistol squat? I was like, oh yeah, easy. I said, can you do one now? I said, not even close. I can barely walk. He said, well, that's going to be our metric for making sure that you're good to go. Yeah. And so I went through a lot of the resets with original strength, made them very gentle, never worked into pain. And guess what? Got my pistol squat back, and I've been a new man ever since.
Yeah, awesome.
So maybe I have experienced super healing powers. Yeah, because I'm doing things on my right hip that I should not be doing. Yeah, given that diagnosis, you know, and I was slated for a hip replacement. Yeah, yeah, but not for 10 years because I was too young to get one.
Of course, you don't want to have 3 of them.
No, and so the doctor's plan was he was going to put me on pain medication. for 10 years. And I was like, that's just not an option for me. I'm not doing that. So, thanks to that, and just being patient with myself. Yeah, I bounced back and I'm doing everything I love. So
Yeah,
maybe I do have that superpower. I just don't know it.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Mark.
I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to set this up.
So we're going to have Mark in Australia in September. We're nailing down the dates, and I'll put out information about that soon. But the idea is that Mark's going to come through and he's going to teach us how he trains and a bit about his training philosophy. There's going to be a couple of options that we're looking at rolling out, but those details will go up onto the social media at some point in the not too distant future. But yeah, it's going to be towards the back end of September, I expect, and it's going to be pretty fantastic.
I am so looking forward to that. You have no idea. I'm excited to come down to Australia. I think I mentioned in an earlier conversation, I was down there as a little kid.
Yeah.
And had a great experience. I was like, I was maybe like in fourth grade. So I don't remember everything.
Yeah.
So I am very excited to come on down and meet everybody and just experience a week or so of being in Australia. It sounds awesome.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Piers.
Catch you later, man.